Okay, looks like we are live. I'll wait a second and see if anybody's joined. Okay, so I'll just go ahead. Hi everyone, I'm Alana, the intern for Huffman Counseling Services. Thank you for joining our second episode of our three-part mental health series. The topic today will be on child and adolescent mental health. Before we get started, I just wanted to share a quick disclaimer. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified mental health provider with any questions that you may have regarding a medical condition or mental disorder. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you heard on this episode. Okay, so today we have three special guests, which is really nice, and I'm just going to ask if they could go ahead and introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Felicia Miller. I am the owner and therapist for Greater Purpose Counseling LLC here in Indianapolis. I hold my LMHCA and I will be sitting for my last test in like 3 weeks in Jesus' name. I serve with individual therapy, family therapy, group therapy. We have a mentor that works with us, and I love working with kids in trauma and adult women in trauma.
Awesome. My name is Rochelle Rosario. I'm a school social worker in Sparta area schools. I've been in the schools for about 7 years now. I'm an LLMSW, taking the test in a couple weeks. So yeah, excited about that. Very passionate about mental health and educating just everyone on the needs to pay attention to your mental health and take care of your mental health. And yeah, just excited to share some knowledge that I've learned along the way.
Thank you.
Yay!
I'm Alex Diener. I work at Tree of Life Counseling in Rochester Hills, Michigan. I am an LLPC, which just stands for Limited Licensed Professional Counselor. I will get my full license in the fall, and I am super passionate about working with children and teens and really ending the stigma around mental health, especially in the church and for people who like ascribe like the faith, and not being like, let's just pray about it, like pray about it and see a counselor too, please. So I'm super passionate about ending the stigma and, like Rochelle said, just educating people on, mental health in general.
Thank you. Okay, so we're just going to jump right in. So the first question that I have today is, what are some warning signs of mental health problems in children? If anybody wants to jump right in, you can.
I would say a change in behavior. All kids have a baseline, and when you see that their change has happened. So, for example, if a kid is normally sneaky and they're disruptive and they're really just defiant and all of a sudden they're really sweet, they're doing something. They didn't change their behavior. They're pulling something over on you. Or if a kid is really sweet and they're really nice and all of a sudden they're being very disruptive, there's something going on. There's something, but that change, and parents know baseline of their kids. People who are in their closer, teachers know baseline, but when it changes, that's when something's going on.
Yeah, I would add a drop in grades, also increased irritability, maybe some more isolation, maybe more screen time even, not having your kid come out as much to have, when you have dinner, just to talk to you. Those are some of the things that I've noticed.
Yeah, and I think too, because we've been home more because of the pandemic, parents have noticed like a change in a child's sleeping pattern. So now all of a sudden we're sleeping until 1 o'clock in the afternoon, whereas before, like Felicia said, every child has a baseline, and now that baseline has changed. We're sleeping in more. We're not sleeping enough. There's been a change in grooming and hygiene. All of a sudden, your kiddo doesn't want to take a shower for a couple of days. There's been a change in eating where your kid, you feel like, is eating too much or maybe not enough. So some of those other changes that are more obvious, I think, too. And I always tell parents, like, you're the expert of your child and I'm the expert in mental health. So like, your kid, if something's up, like, again, like Felicia said, you know that baseline that your child has. And if you kind of suspect like something's not right here, you're probably right, and you should do something about that.
Right. Yeah, thank you. That's really great. So what if you see these signs and you think that your child is struggling? What is the next best thing to do?
You can go ahead. I seen your mouth move.
I think it just depends on the child, honestly. So, some parents have a more open relationship with their kids, and they have that good relationship and that good line of communication where your kid's just going to be like, yeah, mom, yeah, dad, I'm struggling, I'm feeling down, I'm feeling worried, I'm feeling scared, or whatever the feeling may be. And other times your kid's like, yeah, I'm not talking to you, I'm a teenager and I'm just going to go talk to my friends. So, having that open conversation with your child and saying, hey, if there is something that's going on, I'm here for you. Like, I'm your parent, I care, and I want to support you. But also like reaching out for professional help, whether it's in the schools, and Rochelle, you can probably give some insight about that, what the schools can do, or, finding someone through your insurance or a community mental health agency.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think reaching out to teachers. So, if it's a middle schooler or high schooler, reach out to their teachers. Say, hey, have you guys noticed anything? I'm noticing this or this or this. Can you pay attention to this? They, may say, well, why don't we have them see the counselor? In the littles, they have one teacher. So, it's a lot easier for that teacher to notice something going on. And the parents may not even have to reach out. It might be the teacher saying, hey, I've noticed something in Johnny today, and he just doesn't seem right. Maybe we can, are you noticing this at home? What can we do? They haven't been paying attention at school as much, or they haven't been completing their work. And so, I mean, there's so many things that can point to something going on. And, I think if parents ask the right questions, sometimes they don't know the right questions to ask. And so if you're saying, hey, how was your day? Kids are going to say, hey, fine. But my day was fine. They don't want to talk about it. But if you say, hey, who did you play with today at recess? And then, that leads to, well, I didn't play with anybody today. Or my friend isn't talking to me today. So a little bit more details when you're asking questions so that they feel like they have to give you a little bit more. So
one of the things I would add is parents because for 4 years I worked at an agency which was residential, and then now I've been in private practice. And the thing that I noticed that seems to be a pattern is parents are like, I'm my kid's number one fan. My kid can come to me with anything, but the kid is like, I can't tell my mom this. I cannot come to my dad. And so there becomes this disconnect, and the parent is like, I'm here for you, and the kid's like, oh, I can't share this. So I would definitely encourage parents have to be mindful of their reactions to when kids come to them and say, hey, guess what? I'm feeling suicidal. I did drugs. I have a friend who's been touched. Like, your reaction is either going to shut them down and they're not going to come and share anything with you, or it's going to open the door and they're going to know that if they wind up at a party that they thought was going to be, parents involved and nothing, and then they show up and it's really liquor and everybody's turning up, they're going to know that they can call you and say, come get me. But it's parents being mindful of how they react when kids come and say stuff. And I love what you said about the questions, because that's a big thing. Who did you play with? What's the rules of the game? Where did you play? Are there secrets with the game? Different things like that. And then they're like, oh, well, hold on.
Yeah, and too, like with the parents' reactions, I think one thing that prevents especially teenagers and middle schoolers from coming to parents is they have a fear that they're going to get in trouble. And, like, I failed a test. Okay, I'm going to get in trouble. So, maybe they're not going to come and tell mom or dad. Or, my friends were like, you said, like, they're drinking, or there was something, they're vaping, or they're smoking at this party, and they don't tell because they're afraid that they're going to get in trouble, and that blocks the communication as well.
Thank you. So going off of that, then, what if you know your child is struggling, but they are that child that they just won't talk to you? You're asking questions, they're just isolating themselves. What can you do?
I would say normalizing feelings. A big reason I've noticed that kiddos don't come to their parents is because their parents don't normalize if they've had a bad day. They don't share, what, today was a struggle, this is why. Today I hurt, this is why. And so since they're not normalizing it, kids don't go and talk to them. So parents need to definitely normalize, but then hopefully a parent has that person that can reach the kid that they can't, because every parent should have that connection, whether it's the auntie, the uncle, the ninis, the hoo-hoos, of whatever's, that is going to be able to connect and be like, take my kid to lunch and find out what's going on, get the dirt for me.
Right.
Yeah, I have one of those kids that I had to like pull the layers off. I think, yeah, grandparents is a good thought too. Yeah, my mom can pull things out of her that I could never pull things out of her. And, even her dad, she doesn't tell me stuff. She's like, you're going to social work me, Mom. And, so it's like, okay, I get it. All right, go talk to your grandma or, somebody. But I think now with the whole social media stuff, I think also you might find a little bit more out through social media, because if you are paying attention to what they're doing and you know what they're doing and you have the passwords to all their stuff, I think paying attention to who they're reaching out to, what they're saying when they're reaching out. I think we kind of let our kids go a little bit on like the screens and stuff like that, because we're like, oh, it's fine, they're not talking to anybody. But I think it's important to pay attention to that stuff, because they are talking to people and telling them much more than they're telling parents. So
100%.
Yeah.
Even your sweetest kid.
Yes.
Yeah.
The sweetest, most innocent kid they're getting caught up.
Yep.
So I had something to add on to that. So, oh goodness. Okay. So sometimes a parent does that. They say, oh, go hang out with grandma today. And let's say your child opens up to grandma and then grandma tells you. How do you deal with that information? Because if your child finds out, like, grandma told my mom and I didn't want to tell my mom, there might be that trust that's a little shaky there. So how do you deal with that when you find things out that they didn't actually tell you?
Do you want the mom answer or the social work answer?
Whatever you want. Both? I don't know.
My mom answer is, grandma has to tell you that she doesn't want you to know, but she's going to tell you anyways. And then I'm going to find out asking the right questions. So kind of being Snoopy. The social work answer is grandma should probably keep it confidential, but say, hey, Mom, maybe you should think about this, or maybe you should think about therapy, or maybe, I just think that they're struggling. So kind of depends on what grandma feels like. If grandma feels like because if you can trust mom to not say anything, grandma has to be able to trust mom to be able to just say, okay, hold it in, see if she can find out a different way, or maybe just take care of it by, looking for services for her, or having her see a counselor at school or something like that.
Yeah. Thank you. Any additions to that?
I agree with that, and I would definitely add, it depends on the connection dynamic, because some people, they're not very connected, and some people just don't know really what they're saying and what the mom expects. Mm-hmm. So the big thing that I would add would be, if the kid is setting themselves up to get hurt, they're involved with stuff that's dangerous, they're going to plan to, hurt themselves, any of that kind of stuff, where they're, they are sneaking a meat and they are doing some drugs, they are, that kind of stuff, that definitely needs to be shared with mom. And then mom can be like, okay, now I know how to, scapegoat around and, set something up so I get found out or whatever. But if it's none of that kind of stuff and it's just, petty normal kid stuff, then grandma just definitely, or aunt, uncle, whoever, just be like, okay, they're fine. They're, they don't want to talk to you about this because they're embarrassed about puberty, Yeah,
absolutely. Safety is the number one important thing. So, I mean, you can, even depending on the situation, you can explain to grandma, if she tells you anything like this, or if he tells you anything like this, then I need to know. So.
Anything you want to add, Alex?
No, I mean, that's something I even tell like my kiddos and, practice is like, that first session, I'm like, all right, here's the deal. Everything you say is confidential, except, and I give them the caveats, and safety is always a caveat. Like if you're, hurting yourself, and I talk about what that means, or you want to hurt somebody else, like I got to tell mom or dad or whoever it is that's, bringing you. So yeah, safety first, always.
Okay, thank you. So let's say you do find out that your child is struggling, they open up to you, or you just find out any other way. What are some ways that you can help them cope with things? What would you say? You can start like general, more specific.
I mean, I think the first thing is just to like thank your child for being honest with you. Like, thank you for sharing that with me, and empathize with them. That was probably hard for you, or that was embarrassing for you. Thank you so much for telling mom or dad or whoever you are to the child, and kind of going from there, because just saying that and having that empathy with that child could open the door for more information to be disclosed.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as coping strategies go, mindfulness, there's a lot of apps, awesome apps to practice some of that. Another kind of distraction to frustration or anxiety is think about $1,000 and what you would spend $1,000 on. Everyone likes to spend money, so that kind of distracts their brain a little bit. Teaching some reframing, so trying to catch those negative thoughts and reframing. How can I change my thought pattern to change my feelings, to change my behaviors? I mean, some of the stuff it's logical enough where a kid can catch on to it and be like, okay, I got it. This makes sense, So just some concrete strategies that they can use in their seat at school, at home, in the car. Fidgets. I mean, there's a lot of really cool options out there. So, yeah, I don't know. Encourage. I mean, and also talking to the school counselor. I think there's counselors in a lot of schools. There are very few schools that don't have counselors or access to a counselor. So I think, if you're nervous about anything, just say, hey, would you be willing to talk to your counselor at school and maybe set that up? It doesn't have to be long term. I mean, talking to the counselor could be like you talk over about a situation and then you feel better about it and you move on. It doesn't have to be every week for an hour or something. So.
Right. Anything, Felicia?
I would add, us as parents have to model coping skills. If we want our kids to learn them, then we have to do them ourselves and do them with them, and like the physical activity. You got a kid who's really angry, get him outside on a bike, get him out, get him a punching bag, just do stuff that's going to, a kid with ADHD, all these kind of things. But we have to, as the parents, have to model that. We have to show, okay, I'm upset, so this is what I do, because they're going to literally mirror however we process emotions. They're going to mirror and do everything that we do. So if we're trying to model and do it in a healthy way and teach them the mindfulness stuff, teach them the thought restopping, all this kind of stuff, hopefully we're going to set them up that when they need therapy, it won't be because of us.
That's really good. So a little something extra. So what do you do if you're a parent who you find out your child is struggling and they do open up to you? What if you're not that parent who thinks to say thank you right away, and what would be the first step? What would you tell a parent who might not know how to react to something like that? What would maybe a resource? Oh, say that again?
Ask them for a pause.
Okay.
Like, ask the kid for a pause. Like, hold on. And thank yous can always come later. Parents can always come back and say, you know what, I didn't handle that appropriately. You kind of shocked me. But if you know that you're going to freak out and like drop your basket, ask, can we pause for a second? and you go to your corner, I'm going to go to my corner, give me a minute to really process this information that you told me, and then I'm going to come back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when you're in it, you're kind of just like in crisis mode. So I think you're trying to like, okay, you just said this. Well, does your teacher know? Who knows? Who else knows? You can ask those questions. Who else knows? Well, who are you comfortable sharing this with? Do you mind if I share this with, grandma or grandpa or, a relative, so I can, kind of figure out what we can do together? I think trying to make them feel like you're on their team is also probably a good strategy, because the me against you thing, or you're naughty, that thinking that is not, biblical, thinking that is not, it's not in line with our values, or like that kind of talk can be, talked about later. But I think initially they need to know that you're on their team.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. So kind of switching around a little bit. So has advancement in technology had an impact on our child mental health?
It's so bad, Alana. It's so bad.
Yeah, I have younger siblings, so I can.
It's honestly alarming. So as someone who works with teenagers and children, and I'm sure as you two ladies can attest, it's like there's a new app every 5 minutes, and they're designed to harm children. I hear about new apps all the time: Discord, Amigos, TikTok, and then obviously Facebook's only for old people now, so I guess I'm old, but Instagram. But there's all these apps, and it's just designed to keep them engaged in their screens. And the more time that they're spending on their screens, the more time they're actually disconnected from the real world, and especially at bedtime. So I don't think a lot of people know this, but our phones emit blue light, which actually shuts down the melatonin production in our brain. So even when kids are like, oh, I put it on night mode, no. That's not really making that big of a difference. The blue light is still being emitted through your phone. It's still stopping that melatonin production. No wonder you can't sleep. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and now you're on your phone till, all hours of the night. And Felicia, you're laughing. And parents don't want to believe this, but your kids are doing very inappropriate things on their phones. They are. It's so
Every time.
It's just, I tell parents, you should have the passwords to your kids' phones. You need to know what's going on there, because there is just so much inappropriateness that happens, and kids are getting cyberbullied. They're getting peer pressured. All of these things are happening. And then it's like, again, it goes back to, well, I'm going to get in trouble if I tell. And if you have that, the passwords, and you know what's going on, it's helpful. And I also tell parents, should take the phone away at bedtime. Nothing good happens on a phone late at night. They don't need it. Sorry if there's teenagers watching and you're mad, but it's true. You don't need your phones at night. Nothing good is going to happen from that.
Right.
That's my 2 cents.
One of the things I noticed, and I'm going to date myself, like when I was in high school, we had beepers and, ashtrays full of quarters. So we didn't have this 24/7 thing attached to us.
Yeah.
And working in the residential, the first thing, and it was a deal breaker for so many kids. You come in, we take your phone, it goes in the safe, you don't touch it. These kids there were kids that were like, okay, cool. But there were other kids that they would elope, they would fight, they would, no, this is my everything. They could not handle it. And many of the girls that I had worked with that had been trafficked, it all was looped in through the social media. They were baited and switched, and then they would advertise through different things like TikTok, like Snapchat, like, like she said, there's a new one every time you turn around. And the identity that girls have with filters, they can't even take a picture without adjusting it so much that they don't even look like themselves. So when they do really see themselves, they're version of how they view themselves is not reality because they're so used to all the filters that adjust how they really look. And so it's not good.
Well, and I've been in the schools enough where I've had kids who, were playing video games a lot when they were younger, and now I have them in high school, and they are all suffering from depression. And so I just think, and that's just what I've seen. I know there's evidence to say different things, but that's just what I've noticed in the students that I've, specifically worked with. I think it's important to really teach balance. Social media can be good for some things. Some kids have pretty significant anxiety in social situations, and so they feel more comfortable, in a setting like this where, I don't have to go out and I don't have to be in crowds. I can talk to somebody. But, long-term, consistent time spent on screens does just kind of exacerbate depression and anxiety, and it isn't good for anybody, and then everyone around you is affected by it. Because even my kids, if they've been on the screen for 2 hours or 3 hours, and it's like they are irritable, they are mad at each other, they are fighting, and I'm like, what in the world? But then I'm like, oh yeah, you guys haven't been playing outside, you've been on a screen. And I don't even know what it does. Like, I can't even point to something specific because I have younger kids, so right now it's like little stuff that they're watching kids play, which is kind of strange to me. But like, why is that causing the irritability? So it always points to the time frame. So we have, like, the balance of screen time is super important. If you're teaching it at a young age and you're restricting access as they get older, and there's clear parameters, and they know what to expect, and it's not theirs all the time, that they don't have. I don't even know what I'm going to do with my kids with a phone. As I get more nervous as we go, because I work at a high school, and it's pretty scary. But yeah, I just think balance is key, and be very careful, and don't. I would check your kid's phone daily, weekly,
Yes.
constantly.
Well, too, and when we look at the data on like pornography exposure, the average age of exposure is 11 years old in this country. So we think, oh, my kid's not exposed to that, my kid doesn't see that. Well, if your kid, isn't receiving it or sending it, they're being exposed to it. The average age is 11. That's a middle schooler.
Mm-hmm.
That's 5th or 6th grade. It's just crazy to think about.
And the porn that they're being exposed to is not like the 70s porn that we were exposed to. It's not that. It's aggressive and it's violent porn that they're being exposed to. Not that ever being exposed to 70s porn was a good thing, but in contrast, it's so different. It is, the stuff that they're being exposed to is really like, whoa, that's a whole nother level of violence. And one of the things I try to educate any teenagers, any adolescents, is if you're looking up porn, you're not looking for someone who's in their 40s. You're not looking for a woman that's the age of your mom. You're looking for someone who's barely 18, teenage. That means you're watching a video of a girl who's been sex trafficked. Right. You are watching a video of a girl who's being raped. So therefore you're participating with the consumption of that. And they're always like, time out, I'm like, because that's what you're doing, and the younger that they're exposed to it, that addiction it gets deep rooted, and porn rewires your brain.
Yes. I had an elementary school student recently that I was working with exposed to pornography, elementary. So it's getting younger, and it's just so scary. And, kids sometimes, like the little ones, like Rochelle was saying, like you have littles, sometimes they have access to like mom and dad's phone. It's like, oh, here, just watch YouTube or whatever. I need to do something. And even if mom and dad don't have porn, it's still like it can come up and kids can be exposed. So we have to be careful even with like our littles and our toddlers of what they may come across, because it's just the internet is, it's good and there are good things that come from it, but it also poses a threat to the safety of our children.
And it desensitizes them to, like, it becomes normal. Like they feel like it's okay, this is my world, so it feels normal to me. All these people are doing this stuff, so this is normal. I should be involved in this stuff because everybody is. And I think it shrinks their world to to the point that it desensitizes their, like, the sexuality of it, like, and the intimacy of it. It's more of a, kind of a normal everyday thing, some of that behavior. So
I saw a quote one time, and I know who put it, but I won't say her name, but she's a sex therapist, and she went to a training, and she had posted it, and I'm friends with her and I love her, but she had posted, and I've posed this question for adults, kids, everything. If you would not allow the Fast and Furious to teach your kids how to drive, why would you let porn teach your kids what sex is? Because it's completely unattainable. It's unrealistic. And even with YouTube, like you said, there are plenty of parents. I see it everywhere I go. Here, please just get on my phone. I got to do something. But even in certain things, there's blips. Like I remember walking into the educational room at the residential, and a kid was watching a YouTube video, and it was like, kids like to watch people who are gamers. They like to watch other kids. It makes no sense to me. Like, you're going to sit there for hours and watch some of the kids play video games? Like, what? I'm sorry. But I just happened to be there at the right time, being nosy, and I saw a sexual scene. I mean, it was just as fast as it came up, it came back. I grabbed his laptop, I scrolled it back, and I was like, boom. And I watched it, and it was just enough that it was like, here, it's in your eye, and now it's gone. That if you really weren't looking and staring at the screen, you would miss the porn that had been filtered into this simple kids video. So parents have to be on their toes. They have to be nosy.
Yeah, there's a lot of those subliminal messages, even in some Disney movies, that people have pointed out. I mean, I'm not going to go into detail on that, but there's just lots of things where it's just everywhere. And if you're not paying attention, you don't see it right away, but it's still, like, everywhere, which is just very unfortunate. Does anyone have anything else they wanted to add to that? Okay. So the next question is pretty broad. I guess, how can we overcome mental health stigma to help our children and adolescents?
It starts at home. I mean, I think sometimes parents bring their children to therapy, and it's like, we see you for an hour a week, and they're like, fix my child. I'm like, I don't have a magic wand. I can't fix them. That's not what therapy is. We're not like healing people, right? We're not like, just here, you're fixed, you're cured, no more anxiety. But it starts at home, and like having those conversations about mental health, like you were saying, Felicia, like even with like the coping skills and what we kind of talked about, just like modeling that good behavior. Like, yeah, I had a bad day, and this is what I'm going to do about it. We're going to go on a walk tonight, or we're going to practice some mindfulness, or we're just going to chill out and have a movie night tonight. And seeing your kids like know that sometimes, yeah, like mom and dad or who's ever in the home, sometimes grown-ups have bad days, and that's okay, but we're not gonna just do nothing about it. And having things like this, having in schools, I'm sure, Rochelle, you can provide more information. I don't know, with COVID, if there's like, I remember when I was in high school, we would have like assemblies, like pep assemblies about suicide and things like that. But just the more we talk about it, the more it's normalized, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, and even in our accommodating ways as parents, like, your kid has anxiety. Okay, this is how I'm going to provide them control. You're going to make sure they, sometimes kids with anxiety do better when they know what's coming. Sometimes they do better when they don't, because they're going to get all worked up about it. So, you're a kid. Are you like, so if you get all stressed out in the morning, let's create a visual of the step-by-step things you have to do to get ready in the morning. Just trying to accommodate also. I think it's like, they have anxiety, I'm going to send them to therapy. Okay, well, they have anxiety, which means they have a need to control something. And so when they're feeling anxious, they feel out of control. So how can we at home be preventative and do some preventative measures at home so they feel like they have more control. Giving choices, you know, stuff like that, where I think some of the mental health stuff can be reduced if we as parents can kind of just take some of those measures. And some of us do it automatically because you know your kid and you happen to just, you know, create an environment that makes them a little bit calmer. But sometimes you get really angry with them, and maybe the kid is, I don't know, gets really anxious when they hear loud noises and you're yelling at them all the time. Well, of course they're going to be freaking out, you know, all the time because you're yelling at them. Okay. So I think pay attention to your behavior and their response. I know this isn't the time or place, but I love the 5 love languages. And, you know, adapting that to your child. Pay attention. Do they like gifts? Do they like quality time? Do they like words of affirmation? Do they like physical touch? Do they like acts of service? I mean, you can tell. I can tell with my kids which one is which. And so if you're intentional about, okay, this kid is a gift kid, I'm going to put a little verse in their lunchbox saying, you know, something encouraging to them. They're going to soak that up. Yeah. You know, so recognize your kids and how they love and they share love, because if even something simple like that, or giving them love and the way they feel loved, can reduce a lot of the back and forth and the arguing and the irritability and the anxiety. So I think we have a lot more power than we think we do when it comes to our kids and their mental health. And as parents, just kind of researching a little bit more and recognizing that stuff. But then when it gets to a point where we can't do it anymore, that's when we, you know, get some help. Yeah. So, and you know, you start with your family doctor, you start with the teacher, you start with the counselor at school. There's so many ways now to reach out and get some help. And if you are over your head, I think it's time to do that. But it's okay, because if you think about your families, everyone's family, my family, everyone has somebody who struggles with significant mental health. And maybe it looks like, maybe it comes out in behavior. You know, maybe they're thinking, oh, that person's naughty. Well, the person probably has significant mental health issues, and it's coming out in anger or frustration, and not the best way. They're not learning. You can say, well, they haven't learned yet how to use some coping strategies for their frustration. I mean, everyone struggles with worry and feeling down, and I mean, it's everywhere, and we can try to hide it and push it down, but that doesn't do anyone any good. So, I'll let somebody else talk.
Thank you.
I had a little panic. I'm sorry.
No, that's the only time we
I
want
love it. I agree with everything both of the ladies said, but I would also add just that normalizing. You know, there was a few days, and not just normalizing in my home, but I need everybody who's in the circumference of my children's influence to normalize mental health, because I don't want to be all pro mental health. My husband's pro mental health, you know, all the aunts and the uncles are pro mental health, but then the coach or the youth leader or the pastor is not, and they're, you know, going, I'm sorry, you didn't pray enough, so we gonna have to talk about Jesus and not that thing that your mom does. Then there's a discord because a person's showing something that is opposing what we are trying to build. But it has to be normalized all the way across the board, and that includes, like, there was quite a few days my kids would be, I mean, I got littles, okay? You're talking kindergarten, first grade, second grade. Virtual learning, it is the devil for that age. Probably for high school, but kindergarten and virtual learning is this, you know, and my kid trying to get on YouTube, and I'm like, but there were days my kids couldn't do it, and I would just text the teachers, you know what, we're just having a mental health day because mommy lost it and was freaking out and yelling, and the kids are crying and yelling, so we're going to go to the park and we're going to go creek stomp and we're just going to go get ice cream. And then the next day my kids are fine. But it's recognizing, I don't think there's enough parents who recognize that 2020 had an effect on kids.
Yeah.
They're quick to recognize, like, how it bothered them, but then they look at their kid and, you know, you need to suck it up. It's not that bad. You just have to do school online, you know, but they might have gotten something socially out of being at school.
Right.
They have to grieve their own loss of they're no longer doing sports, you know, and I think parents shortchange mental health of kids. But it's got to be normalized across the board. Everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I hope
So,
that one.
so Felicia, what if there is somebody, like there is a youth leader or like somebody who's really involved in your child's life who's not on board, who's just maybe doesn't care, they don't know, like, how do you as a parent like address that person?
Do you want mom version of that, or do you want politically correct version of that?
Whatever you want.
Mom version.
Mom version is I'm going to be very, very up in somebody's face. If you are in a leadership position, a coach position, you are in a position of authority, and you're minimizing mental health with kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be pretty. You're going to get Felicia who doesn't have a master's and didn't love Jesus, because you're hurting people. I don't do well when people are hurting people, because that causes long-term damage, and then that causes spiritual insecurity. It causes self-esteem insecurity, because the kid is like so confused at why all of a sudden am I not good enough for God to help? And God's not answering my prayers. So then that would be the not very nice Felicia version, but the politically correct version would be, hey buddy, we need to have a simple conversation. You know, and I'm going to pull your boss in, and we're all going to have a real conversation about how you need education on mental health. You need continuing education. You need to be brought up to speed to 2021, not 1950. You know, and I would do it with my white velvet gloves on, and everything's going to be very sweet, petting the lion, and, you know, all that.
I just can't. Please, I'm going to cry because you're so funny. Like, when I laugh really hard, I cry.
That might be my soapbox.
Well, and I think people that hide from mental health generally are dealing with their own mental health concerns. And so, it's not bad to just bring it up and say, hey, with my kid, I'd like you to be able to encourage positive interactions with, mental health professionals.
Like, here, can I do a training with you? Can I teach you? See one, do one, teach one. I'll show you and teach you, so the next kid, and next time you do something, you have the skills. Call me anytime. I'll meet you for coffee and help you. That's the politically correct version.
Thank you. Does anyone have anything else they wanted to add to that? Okay. So before we wrap up, does anybody have anything they wanted to share? Maybe something they're doing. I know, Felicia, you have your own counseling service, or maybe something new that you're doing, a book that you want to recommend, a podcast, like anything like that would be helpful for a viewer.
Eventually I'm going to be getting around to doing the webinars for trainings, like on sex trafficking. That's a big heartbeat of mine, especially getting into doing trainings for churches and private schools, because like Miss Rochelle works for a school. Your main IPS, like your main public schools, township schools, they've got built-in therapists and counselors, but your private schools and your small schools, they don't, because they don't have the budget. They, for whatever reason. So my thing that I really am trying to, once I get past April 7th, in Jesus' name, I'm just going to pass that test. Once I get past that, I really do plan on doing more trainings with churches and with schools to be able to offer that same psychoeducation, what mental health looks like, what trauma-informed care looks like, all those kind of things. So then that way, when they're working with kids, they're working within the youth group, they're working within, a school setting, they don't see a bad kid like what was stated. They see like, oh, wait a minute, I think there's something more that's causing that. So let me have a little bit of trauma-informed care and pull you to the side and be like, hey, what's going on? So those kind of trainings is something that I do plan on doing. But a book that I'm reading right now, which is, that's why I had my phone up earlier. I was looking for it because I couldn't remember the name. Suffering and the Heart of God by Diane Langberg. She's a Christian psychologist, and she has done a ton of her whole career is trauma and trauma in the church. And so that particular book is for counselors and pretty much anyone who works with people and really explains like just trauma and the effects. And one of the things that she says in that book is the 20th century, the trauma is the mission field, because you're not going to have a school, a church, a neighborhood, or a family that has not been affected by trauma.
Right.
And we have to come forward and recognize that trauma is so deep rooted and it really rewires your brain. So we have to go at it differently. But that book, hands down, I'd recommend that to anybody.
Thank you.
I work in the schools, but this summer I'm going to work in Olivia's private practice, so Huffman Counseling Services. I'm going to work a day there. I'm bilingual, so I speak Spanish and English, and I love the Hispanic population. So if you're looking, I work, I mean, my job is a lot with kids with ASD and emotional impairment, so I'm very familiar with those populations and adolescents. So if you are looking for somebody in the summer, I would love to work with your child. So,
Oh, yeah, great.
Yeah.
So my focus is like solely trauma. And so I am in the process of finishing up EMDR training, which is a reprocessing therapy. It's amazing. I really recommend that all counselors do it and have it in the toolbox because it's good. And then a book that I just finished up reading is called The Whole Brain Child by Daniel Siegel.
I saw that.
It's so good. This is a great book for parents, teachers, anybody. It just talks about how we can connect the emotional brain with the logical brain, and it's not bad behavior. Please don't call your kids bad. That's not good. Don't call your kids bad. It's unhelpful, their behaviors. It's not bad. And so this book is really, it just gives very practical strategies and very like layman's terms, you know, just like, so if you're not a mental health professional, it's easy to understand, just things you can do with your kids when they're getting emotionally dysregulated.
Very cool.
I love that you said don't call them bad. Like one of the things that I do with my kids is I'm always like, you are not, I specifically start with, you are not bad. You made a bad choice.
Yeah.
You are wonderful and you're intelligent, but you made a non-intelligent choice. So that, and that's the thing that I do try to encourage all the parents that I work with too, is, and even spouses, like when they're working with someone, and it's changing that culture, it's changing that language. You know, what is it that you're saying that's going to be that tape that they hear every time they see themselves in the mirror, every time they, you know, try to introduce themselves to someone or do anything. Okay, I am intelligent, I am smart, but wait a minute, is this a dumb choice or a good choice? Because it helps create that pause. Wait a minute, you know, and so, yeah, I love that you said that.
Yes, thank you. Okay, does anybody have anything else they wanted to say before we end this? Okay, if not, thank you so much.
Actually. Parents need to give themselves grace and mercy. I'm sorry. But parents need to give themselves grace and mercy because they're their own worst critic about their parenting. I've seen some really, I mean, I got some rock star moms as clients, and they still will have self-doubt that they're messing up their kid or they're doing something wrong, or, and really they're not. But parents need to give themselves grace and mercy because it is really hard to juggle everything all the time, and then somebody has a temper tantrum in the middle of mire. You know, like someone has a bad day. So give yourself some grace and mercy. It's hard to be a parent, and it's hard to be a parent in COVID.
Right.
Being a parent is the hardest job in the world. There's no guidebook.
And the guidebook you probably have may not be very good if you didn't have very good parents.
That's the truth.
Right. But there's always resources available.
Yes.
So you can get some help. You're not alone.
Right.
Yeah. Amen. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining. If you have anything else to say, feel free to jump in. But so I'm just going to encourage viewers, if you have any questions and maybe you didn't watch live, you can always still comment and we can get a specific question answered. Or if you wanted to reach out to somebody specifically, you can send us a message. We have our contact information available on the webpage. And we look forward to seeing you not next Thursday, but the last Thursday of the month. It would be the 25th, and our next topic is about anxiety and trauma. So I think that one will also be a good one to watch. Again, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you. Take care. Have a great night.
Have a good night. Thanks.